I must take you up on the social relevance of all the things you've been saying, because if the church here on earth, the church militant here on earth, has a role to play in the lives of all people, whether Christian or not. And I wonder whether the dogma, the dogmatic nature of the church as you speak of it, doesn't inhibit you from having a role in the lives of ordinary people. A lot of people would find, in a sense, it easier to reject you than someone who you would regard as a rather liberal, social-minded clergyman.
Yes, precisely, and that's why the world is as it is. That's exactly the explanation. You've put it very perfectly. Now, I cannot accept the statement that the church is a social institution in your sense. A church, to me, consists of people who are truly Christian. Now then, you say, what is the relevance of this to the social conditions and the problems? Well, I would say that it is the business of individual Christians to play their part in society. And of course, historically, this is what is most interesting. The church has had her greatest influence upon society and social conditions when she's been most evangelical. Now, this isn't again my theory. I can establish this. I was in Scotland last week commemorating the 400th anniversary of the death of John Knox. You read the account of the conditions in Scotland before Knox, and he's always charged with intolerance and all the things you were saying, but that man changed the life of the whole of Scotland. He introduced an educational system, he changed it morally, politically, and in every respect. The Puritans did it in this country. Cromwell, don't forget, was an evangelical Christian. And then you come on to the 18th century, you have the evangelical awakening, and Whitfield and the Wesleys. That did more to improve social conditions in this country than all the dabbling of ecclesiastics in politics.
You know, and yet it's often alleged against evangelicals that they promise salvation at the end of life and don't in fact apply themselves to the relieving of man's lot here on earth. Now, how concerned are you with man's lot here on earth?
Well, I'm very concerned, and I've always criticized that particular representation of evangelicalism. To me, it wasn't biblical. You see, the biblical view of man is that he's to function in society. For instance, Paul's teaching is that the powers that be are ordained of God, that magistrates and all are ordained by God. That God, you see, there are two elements in my position. Man fundamentally needs this gospel which can renew him and renovate him and make a new man of him. But in the meantime, he's a believer in law and order because sin must be held within bounds. If you don't have magistrates and punishment and so on, well, you'll get chaos, and I think we are witnessing a good deal of it at the present time. But this is a part of the whole Christian position, and Christian people in the past have played their part in politics and in various other aspects of Christian life. Unfortunately, in the last 100 years or so, I agree they have been somewhat guilty of the charge that you bring against them. But a number of us, and by now I think that's more or less gone. I find today that most evangelical Christians are very much concerned about the social implications and are laying great stress upon it.
Can I revert again to this matter of man having lost his sense of sin and therefore not being in a situation of being able to be saved? I would say a great many people now feel that matters of sin are less than their immediate concern. And that being so, do you see much possibility of your point of view prevailing?
Well, I not only see the possibility, I actually see it happening. I find people are turning back to this. I'm traveling about the country a great deal now. I was telling you, I was in Scotland last week. I was in Glasgow on Wednesday night and preached to 2,100 people. Now, it seems to me that something's happening. I find politicians find it very difficult to get 50 people to listen to them. In other words, I believe people are beginning to realize the utter bankruptcy of most of what's been offered them and are turning, perhaps vaguely and even wistfully, back in the direction of this great authoritative message of the New Testament, which I maintain is only represented by the evangelical standpoint. And we've got to bring them to an awareness of this. Of course they're ignorant, but that's the business of preaching.
But isn't this need for an authoritative line, whatever it might be, in conflict with the other trend in man's development, which is for self-expression, fulfillment, self-realization, which you actually disapprove of?
Well, yes, of course I do, because man as he is, you see, the more he expresses himself, the worse things become. You see, if each man is autonomous and is to express himself or herself, you're bound to get conflict, aren't you? If each one of us is a god, and I do what I think is right, well, you think differently, well, there's a clash immediately, and you get chaos. You see, we must, both of us and all others, submit ourselves to God. We've got an authority outside ourselves, and we have a motive and a reason and a purpose. You see, when people deny this, you must get chaos, and you've got it. This is the tragedy. And so my business is to call people back to this. You've got, first of all, to show them why things are as they are. They've got to be clear about this. There's no hope until they are. Now, I know there are people going around today and saying, Jesus loves you and so on. Well, if I were a man on the street, I'd say, well, what about it? Who is your Jesus? I don't want him. I've got a car, I've got a refrigerator, I've got a television set. What are you bothering about? I'm not interested. Well, that is my reply to that. You see, the Old Testament is the law. And as Paul puts it, the law was our schoolmaster to bring us to Christ, to show us our need. Now, when people confront the Ten Commandments, there they see their failure. And it's only when they realize this truly, they'll see their failure, and it's only people who see their failure who are ready to listen to the offer of salvation.
Dr. Martyn Lloyd-Jones, thank you very much.